This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. My name is Angelica I am your host, and today I'm joined by Maureen Hunt. Thank you, Maureen, for coming on to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast.
Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here.
So today we're actually recording at 6:30 a.m, so it's quite early, bright and early. Maureen is an early years consultant, and today she's going to be talking to us about self-efficacy. So I just wanted to start off by asking Maureen, what is self-efficacy? Because a lot of the time we actually hear it in terms of the adult rather than the child. But generally, what do we mean when we say self-efficacy?
Okay, so self-efficacy is a term that was first sort of conjured up in the 1970s by Albert Bandura. He was a Canadian American psychologist, and he talks about it being the belief that you are capable of performing tasks and managing situations. So it's really about learning how to persevere when things are difficult. And it's really important for young children to actually build this into their life, because a child that views themselves as competent and capable is much more likely to persevere through life's challenges as they grow and develop. And it will help them believe them if they have the skills to help them reach their goals. So it is really important that we look at it from a very, very early stage, not just frame it around the adult.
And when you said persevere and perform certain tasks, it kind of reminds me of very skill-based tasks, I guess, and that is something that a lot of practitioners sometimes move away from in terms of being more adult-led and, getting children to perform certain tasks, activities, or skills. How do we kind of balance that in terms of still allowing the child to feel like they are doing something that they want to do rather than almost like being forced to perform, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good point, Angelica. But I think if you look at the child, every single day they are doing tasks that they have to learn. So they have to learn to use the toilet, they have to learn to wash their hands, they have to learn to put their own clothes on, they have to learn to, every minute of the day they are learning to do new things and developing new things. And quite often adults, through wanting to help the child, quite often they will do a little bit too much for those children. They will, put the coats on for them, put the shoes on for them. And we must allow children time to actually persevere and solve their own problems and do their own things. So we need to make sure that any curriculum that we are developing in early years allows children time to develop their skills as well as learn, the things that we want them to learn.
So I guess it's not really about creating specific tasks for children to perform, because that is the first thing I think that most that some practitioners may think of in terms of kind of skills-based activities. But it's more about ensuring that there's time, like you say, for them to be independent and tuning into those moments where they may be struggling, but allowing them to deal with that struggle by persevering themselves and being independent.
Absolutely, allowing them to struggle just a bit, not too much that it becomes frustrating, because if a child becomes frustrated, then, that will be detrimental, really. So just watching that balance, is this child going to persevere just a little bit more? Are they tuned into what they're trying to do? Should I stand back? Should I wait? It's quite a challenge, but then we know that working in early years is a challenge. We know that teaching in early years requires us to have this balanced approach, whether to interact, whether to stand back, whether to observe, whether to join in. So early years practitioners are very used to that kind of level of and way of working with children. So just watching the child that's trying to put their coat on, how are they going about it? Do they need help? Maybe you could ask them, do you need help? Rather than just picking the coat up and sticking it on them because you're in a hurry. quite often we do rush children through things like this because of our own agenda. Oh, it's time to do this, therefore, we haven't got time to wait. Whereas, actually, if you see the child who's putting their shoes on or their welly boots on or their coat on, if you see that as part of the child's day, and not something to do so that we can quickly move on to the next activity, it becomes quite a different thing, and it becomes quite an important thing. The old saying, Henry Ford is reputed to have said, whether you think that you can or that you can't, you're usually right. And I think that's a really important phrase. We've got to get children used to the idea that, they can do things. Otherwise we build helpless children, and we build children that are totally dependent on adults. And you see it that, age 5 and 6, you'll see a child who put their arms out for someone to put the coat on for them, because they have actually now believed that they can't do it. But someone's always done it for them.
They get into that habit of always having that support and things done for them.
And of course,
I guess.
Go on.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of, I guess, the term slow pedagogy, which has been kind of getting more popular now, or at least more well known. It's just about slowing down a little bit more, isn't it? And not putting in too much into the child's day or into the routine.
Absolutely. Giving them the time to go through the day and seeing everything as a learning opportunity and a teachable moment, rather than rushing through transitions and rushing through to activities. Incredibly important. And of course, all this is really important stuff. It's not just about building that independence. It's about building that, the self-efficacy builds as sort of regulation of emotional states and reduces anxiety. And this is one of the key symptoms of mental illness, is anxiety in children. So it's a key driver of success for children going forward. And Bandura firmly believe that if you build self-efficacy from birth, then children will have that protective shield around them that, means that they don't sink into those anxious states and they don't develop mental health issues going forward.
Is that because they have that belief in themselves that they are capable, like you said at the beginning?
Yeah, and it builds optimism, confidence, capability builds optimism. The Children's Society publish a report every year called the Good Childhood Report, and the 2022 report makes for quite stark reading, actually. It talks about UK's children's happiness with their lives continuing to decline. And it says 1 in 6 children aged 5 to 16 are likely to have a mental health illness, and 50% of mental health problems start by the age of 14.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite, it makes for very stark reading. So we need to start thinking about children's mental health really very early on, and giving them that, as I said, that kind of protective shield, so that they can cope with challenges. They can cope with things that happen to them that are unexpected. All of that comes from this strong feeling of self-efficacy.
And I guess it all makes sense when you say about mental health issues, because a lot of the things that adults struggle when they do start to, I guess, realize they have mental health issues is those things from childhood that come up as triggers and traumas. Absolutely.
And we're getting more in tune with recognizing mental health issues in children. We're getting more in tune with being able to kind of support them. But what we're not really getting in tune with is how to prevent them. And I think that's where this comes in really strongly. If we build this, this sense of self, and if you think about it, developing a sense of self and belief in your own abilities, that's really got to be key to well-being. And experiencing success early on improves this, this feeling, and particularly with under 5s, because we know they're developing their sense of self. They're not fully formed. They are developing themselves
Mm-hmm.
as they're going forward. So this sense of self can have a profound impact on their future outcomes. So we do need to start thinking about mental health more proactively, and getting adults that support children to, with developing this, so they become competent and capable.
Mm-hmm. And what we as educators often do is support parents with understanding this. And I think that is something that is quite difficult when parents or carers and other family members, I guess, especially you may see grandparents would really wanting to support children and help them out before they struggle. And like you say, you need to let them struggle that tiny bit. So what would you say would be a good way, a more sensitive way probably, to support parents and families if you do, as an educator, I guess, see them on like after pickup and maybe on like open days and things like that, when you see families a little bit more?
Well, working with families is something that, I firmly believe is built on very good, strong relationships. You need to really put the groundwork in to develop that relationship with parents. And if you develop that relationship with parents that's centered around, the needs of the child and working together in partnership, you're much more likely to be able to have those conversations in a way that doesn't cause upset. So, sharing with parents what children have been doing, how they've been getting on, what they've done, what they've been capable of doing that day, how they're developing, how they're growing, and actually saying this is really good for them. This is really good when the child spends 5 minutes putting their coat on. They're not frustrated. They're just working it out. Explaining that to parents is really, can be very powerful. But you can't do that if you don't have a strong relationship with parents. Otherwise, parents will see it as you criticising them, and of course that never helps anyone.
What about supporting children when they may already be used to having a lot of support and a lot of help, and they get very frustrated straight away before they have that opportunity to even have a go themselves?
Yeah, we will, unfortunately, you will see children that are already struggling with this. So you've got to find sensitive ways that you can support that. So things like following their interests and helping them problem solve with activities. Things like saying to them, "Wow, that you really tried really hard on that." To build that tower. It didn't quite work that time, but if you keep practicing, you'll soon be able to do it. So things, making sure that you are pointing out to children that things do need time, and they do need practice. In my experience, quite often it's very bright children as well who struggle with this. There's very bright children who really pick things up really quickly. If they hit something all of a sudden that they can't do, they just give up. They go, "Oh no, that's not me. I can usually do things, and I can't do this, so I'm giving up." So it's really important that we pick up on those moments, and we just say, "No, this is going to take you time. This is going to take practice. You're going to, need support here," and making sure that you are praising them for effort, not accomplishments. Because when you praise for accomplishments, children will compare themselves with others, and they will see themselves as possible failures. Because if the children in your nursery are always getting praised for doing things well, the child who can't do things well will just see themselves as, "Well, I can't do that," and they will give up.
Because there'll always be someone better than them.
Exactly.
They'll never
And
feel good enough.
in life, there always will be somebody better than you at things, won't there? But if you praise for effort, "Well done, you tried that, you really tried hard, you found it tricky, but you did it," or "Well done, you're very nearly there, bit more practice, and you'll be able to do that on your own," then that encourages feelings of pride. And actually asking children, saying, "How do you feel when they do something, when they manage to do something for the first time? How do you feel?" It encourages them to talk about feelings of pride and satisfaction.
Just quickly, I wanted to thank all the listeners for tuning into the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Those of you who are regular listeners will know that a new episode comes out every Monday morning, ready for your commute, morning coffee, or that reflective start to the week to get you thinking and in the zone. If you haven't already done so, it would really help this podcast to keep going if you subscribe to the channel that you're listening on. The Voice of Early Childhood podcast can be found on 19 different podcast platforms and on YouTube. So it's highly likely that you, your friends, and colleagues can find it on your favorite streaming platform. So please do hit the subscribe button, and this will help us to keep putting out thought-provoking, reflective, and insightful episodes with a wide range of guests. Thank you. I'll let you get back to the episode now.
I was in a nursery once, and it was absolutely lovely. I was there to watch, and this goes back to the days when we did much more involved learning journeys. I was there to see how they were doing how the children were involved in their own learning journeys, because this was a setting that prided themselves on the fact that the children were contributing to their own learning journeys. And they had these little cameras on iPads, and the children were encouraged to get the cameras during the day and take photographs of things that they were proud of. And then their key worker would sit with the child maybe once or twice a week and talk to them about the photographs they'd taken. And the key worker was talking to this child, and they were talking about the pictures she'd done and everything. And then there was a photograph of her feet. And the key worker laughed and said, "Do you know what? I've done that so many times. I've taken photographs of my feet by mistake." And this 4-year-old looked up at her and said, "No, I can put my shoes on." So she had put her shoes on herself for the first time and gone and taken a photograph of it because she was proud of the fact that she'd managed to do that. That's self-efficacy. That just is, no, I'm proud of myself. I've done my shoes. So it's incredibly important that we listen to children and we talk to them about their achievements, and we don't kind of let things like that pass by because they're important.
Yeah, celebrating those little things is important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And when you were saying about, I guess, celebrating those small achievements in terms of effort, it's really about that positive reinforcement constantly, isn't it? Not necessarily that big goal of putting your shoes on or putting your coat on, or those milestones that we often think children should reach at certain ages. Those little things, constantly encouraging them rather than thinking we need to let them struggle when they're putting a coat on. Actually, maybe do help them out because they're going to get too frustrated in that instance, but in other instances, keep building them up and up and up.
Yeah, absolutely. Because after putting in the effort and succeeding, children will be motivated to try new and more challenging tasks. And this builds that resilience. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, and we've all seen it, the child who goes, "I can't do that," and just won't even try, or the child who gets distressed when they're asked to do something new. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, they're much more likely to have a go because they actually recognise that they have got some control over these things in themselves. So adults who send really helpful messages about child's capabilities and skills to handle challenging tasks, they greatly influence a child's willingness to persist during setbacks. And there will be setbacks all the way through life. There are setbacks. So we need to kind of get children used to the fact that life is not easy. Life is challenging. But, you can do it. You can have a go. You can try. And you can succeed, if you persevere. Because if you don't develop that, children with poor self-efficacy, they have a tendency to avoid tasks, and they feel will be too challenging. And they often exhibit quite low self-confidence, and they often perform less well in activities than other children. And of course, this often then displays signs of anxiety, in school and school later on. And they may limit themselves to what they think is possible because they don't have a belief that they're capable of being successful. So that is a key road to mental illness, because if you doubt your own abilities, tend to not to persevere, give up rapidly, feel anxious, negative emotions, it's a slippery slope to poor mental health, really.
It seems like there's such a fine balance to be had, because you were saying how children who are used to success will be able to be more confident and try new things. But then we also need to ensure that children do experience difficulty. So actually, do we sometimes almost expose them to failure in ways where perhaps they may be, say, playing a game with an adult and not always allowing the child to win, because then that actually does set them up for feeling like they always win. And then when they don't, they can't cope with that.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. That one of always letting the child win is a really interesting one, and that happens quite a lot. And of course, as you say, then the child gets very frustrated and upset when they can't win. But we don't need to expose them to difficulties. We don't need to set them up to fail. When you think about the challenges of a very young child going through their day, they don't succeed at things.
Many things.
All the time. They have to learn to hold their spoon. They have to learn to use the toilet. They have to learn to put their clothes on. They have to learn to play with each other, speak. They are constantly learning. And we need to help them see that as a positive thing. Oh, good, you're really trying hard today to do that, to use your spoon. You're doing it really well. So really encouraging them, as opposed to picking up the spoon and feeding the child and shoving food in their mouths, which, takes away all their sense of control. It's quite challenging, but it's about seeing the child's daily life through the eyes of them becoming confident and competent and capable.
And understanding that everything is new to the growing child at that age.
Everything is new to them. So, we don't need to set them up to fail. You just need to encourage them to succeed. It's a kind of, it's looking at it from that perspective, really.
And a lot of what we've been talking about just now actually reminds me of Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development and scaffolding, because you are saying, sometimes you encourage the child to be able to do something on their own next time, and they're nearly there but not quite, so you do scaffold their learning, and they are in that kind of zone where they need support with an adult or another child, and then they can get there on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. These theorists, they often all link and piggyback off each other's works, don't they? But it's about offering only as much help as needed. E.g., you might want to put the zip in the slot for the child's coat, but allow them to pull it up. Way well done. And or ask them, do you need help? You're really trying well. You'll soon be able to do that by yourself. How can I help you? And then let them tell you, if they can, where they would want some help rather than just stepping in. Most of it, as I said, comes from this adult need to move things on. We're in a hurry. How about if you are going out, getting ready 20 minutes before you've got to go instead of 5 minutes? So the child's got the time to sit and think about, what do they need to put on? How are they going to do it? How are they going to get ready? It just makes the day, the routines of the day become learning and teachable moments, rather than focusing what you've got down on the curriculum plan.
Yeah. And the kind of the zone of proximal development, scaffolding, and what you just said as well has reminded me that we can often also allow other children to help children that are struggling. And that's an important thing to do, isn't it, in terms of building up that both children's confidence and self-efficacy.
Yeah. And actually, that's a really good point, because children with a strong sense of self-efficacy will naturally help other children to do things, because they're confident children. And that's what we want, isn't it? And also it does bring up the thing that's so important to remember, that children all develop and master tasks and skills at different rates. So pointing out, you should be able to do that by now, so-and-so can put their wellies on, that doesn't help. That will demotivate them. So making sure that they are really focused on their own strengths, and not comparing them with others is very, very important.
So it's all about their stage of development rather than focusing on their age.
Yeah, absolutely. Stage of development, what they can do. And it's basically tuning into the child. The more you know the child, the more you will know when to offer the help, when to offer the support, what the signs are that they might need help, and kind of making sure that you are there and you are responding to their needs. Choice is really important as well. We haven't talked about choice, and I think it's really important that children have choices. That's not to say that you should be, as an adult, completely at the child's whim around choices. Because life isn't like that. Let's be honest. If you've got to go out and you're a parent, you can't sit there and go, "Shall we go out today? Should we go and get the shopping?
Yeah.
Should we not bother?" There are points where children have to do what you want them to do. However, there are lots and lots of opportunities to give children choices, and we don't take them. And I think that's, things where there's no real consequence for whichever choice the child makes. They're really important. So things like, what socks do you want to wear today? The green ones or the blue ones? That sends a really good message that children have control of some aspects of their life. And that builds independence and self-reliance. So, it doesn't matter what colour socks they wear, does it? So rather than just getting them out the drawer and putting them on the child's feet, giving them those choices.
And simple things like that do build that agency, don't they? And that belief that you can make decisions for yourself.
Yeah. And this doesn't just start when the child's 3 or 4. This starts from birth. I mean, a very tiny newborn baby will cry for when it has a need, and if that need is met, they're getting that message. I can get my needs met by behaving in certain ways and doing certain things, and that message is really important as they get older. So if you think about the child where the parent is feeding them, 7-8-month-old child, the parent might be spoon feeding them and the child turns their head away. That's the child saying, "No, I don't want this. I've had enough." We need to listen to that. We need to actually make sure we're tuning in to when children are making choices. Things like putting toys just slightly out of child's reach. When they're on the blanket, on the ground, on tummy time. Watching them reach for them gives them that, and shuffling and being successful. They're in control. They've got agency. It's so important. Instead of just going, "Oh, child wants that toy," and then giving it to them.
Yeah, and then they don't have that choice.
No.
Yeah, it's such a fine balance.
It is a really fine balance, but we're used to that, aren't we? That's how we work in our years, in that fine balance all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much, Maureen. I think we'll leave it there. It's been great to have that kind of round off of self-efficacy. As I said at the beginning, it's a term that isn't always that clear, I guess, and it's not, I guess, something that we use day to day. We talk about confidence and choice, but bringing it all under kind of one umbrella term of self-efficacy is really important to tie those kind of mental health issues in and all of the wider implications. So thank you for giving us that.
My pleasure. Lovely to talk to you, and we'll speak soon, I hope. Take care.
Yes. See you soon.
Bye-bye.